Hello everyone, my name is George Slatkovsky, and today we're looking at a new update for GS CurveTools version 1.3.2. So I scaled Maya to 200% just for you to see better what we're doing. And in this update we have two main features and a lot of improvements to some old features. So let's get started. Now, although this update is not a major update, there's still a lot of code changes, and I shuffled some files around, so you will have to reinstall the tool completely. So you'll need to delete the folder. First of all, close Maya, delete the folder, and then repeat the installation steps. So you will need to reinstall for this update completely. This update is backwards compatible with previous versions, but just in case, finish your old projects just like before and then update. Now, the first major improvement in this update you'll see over here, Geo to Curve. Now, this button was called Cart to Curve, but since this feature now supports tubes as well, I've renamed it to Geo to Curve, just not to confuse people. And as you remember, you could convert one-sided cars, just like these ones over here, to procedural geometry that is compatible with GS CurveTools. And you just clicked like on cars and convert selected, and you get like a procedural object that was approximated to the geometry that you selected. But right now you can also convert tubes the same way. So you just select tubes or auto, it will automatically determine the shape that you want based on the geometry you selected. So you click on tubes or auto, let's just click here and convert selected, and you will see that now I have a procedural tube that is approximated to this geometry, and you can use all of the options for procedural geometry over here. And of course, the original object is not deleted. So let's explore the new options. As I already told you, auto will automatically determine the output geometry based on the input geometry shape. You also have the same object type, warp and extrude, like before, so you can either create warp cars or extrude cars. You also have match attributes. They are all the same, although some of them will behave a little bit differently based on the output type of cars or tubes, for example, width. You also have the same match UV options, but in this update, UV matching was majorly improved, because before, if you had like flipped UV over here, you had to change UV match options over here, horizontal flip, vertical flip. Now you don't need to do that. It will automatically change the UVs based on the original geometry. Even if they are flipped, you don't need to change any of these options. Of course, if you still want the resulting geometry, resulting curve or UV or something to be flipped, you can just flip it over here, of course, and you'll just get them flipped on the output over here. But by default, those are disabled, and that should be good enough for most of the cases. So now we have reverse curve over here. It was here before, so if you want to reverse the curve after you've converted it like that, for example, you'll see that right now I have my root node over here. You see this square. And if I want this curve to be reverted after the conversion, I can just click or unclick this button over here, deselect this button, and you will see that we will have the root node on the tip over here. So based on what you want or how your curves are configured, you can just click this reverse curve and it will determine where to put the root node. Now, delete original objects will basically just delete the original geometry and after the conversion. So when you are done with it, as you can see, original geometry is gone and you have a new procedural object in place over here. Now, the use aim mesh is a little bit different, as you need to actually select some aim mesh for this. So you enable this, you select some mesh, usually it's the sculpt of your model that you're trying to put hair on, and you click on select aim mesh over here. So I've changed this scene a little bit just for you to understand what I'm talking about. And as you can see, I have this marvelous hair over here. It's not yet converted to the procedural curves. And if I, for example, try to convert it now without selecting the aim mesh like that and convert selected, as you can see, it's succeeded, of course. But now if I select the curves and unhide them, of course, first. If I select curves and see what we are doing over here, you'll see that some of them have root node on the correct spot near the scalp where it should be, and some of them have this root node reversed. Now it's on the tip. Well, how to avoid it? It's very simple. You just need to click on this aim mesh over here. Let me just undo some of the stuff we did. Now you select this aim mesh over here like that. Click, select. You select the geometry and you click on the convert selected over here. Wait a little bit, and now we have that geometry converted to procedural cards. And now if you look at the root nodes, you'll see that now they are in the correct spot. So what this aim mesh is doing, it converts those cards, geometry cards, to procedural geometry, procedural curves. And after that, it checks if the root node is the closest to the scalp. It will not be ideal for every case, because sometimes the tip can be closer than the root of the card to your base geometry. But most of the cases, root is the closest part, so you can use this aim mesh to correctly place the root node of the curve. So once again, you just select the geometry, you click use the aim mesh, and after that you'll select aim mesh over here. And that's it. And you can then convert it and it will try to align the curves correctly. Not the align, but it will just flip them, because the real alignment of orientation is over here where match attributes are. Now the next new feature is a logical continuation to the geo2curve function over here, and this feature is called Unpack. Now it doesn't have its own button, and it's kind of hidden under the unbind, because it is connected to bind objects, the objects that have multiple cards connected to one curve. If you remember from the previous update where I introduced the unbind, unbind will basically remove from the path curve, remove all of its component curves over here, as you can see. Let me just disable, and you'll see that this thing is created from 3 separate curves, right? This object, and you can of course bind it back like that. Unpack will not put them in the middle of the world like the unbind does. Unpack will basically place them where they are right now, with all the deformations of the bind object. So all of these deformations that are applied to all the cards over here. And if I hold Shift and click on Unbind, you will see that it will give me it will give me an approximation of the original object, but now it is actually separate objects using the procedural cards that of course have all of the options available for them. So once again, you have one bind object that is placed somewhere, right? You want to unpack it, but you want those curves to be in the exact same spot as their geometry that you already placed, right? You can hold Shift and click on Unbind, and you will get those separate cards. Now, but by default, it will not delete the original object. So if you want that, you can go to Options, and over here we have a new option that is called Unpack Deletes Original Objects right here. And if you click on it, and let me just close this, and I will unpack this again. I'm holding Shift once again. You'll see that no initial object is left, just this over here. And of course, the original geometry was deleted. Now you might ask that, why do we need unbind now if we have unpack, right? Well, the huge downside of unpack is that although it places those curves in the place where the geometry, the deformed geometry was, you cannot rebind those curves. Well, you can, of course, but they will never be the same as they were before because they are already deformed. What the Unpack does, it basically recreates the cards in place of the geometry. The same thing that Geo2Curve does, but it's just a little bit, just a little bit more automated. So you cannot rebind those original cards to a new curve like you can do with unbind. So if you unbind, it's there in the middle of the world. You make some changes. For example, I want this card to be like that. I want this card to be like that. And after that, you just go ahead and bind it back where it was. And as you can see, those deformations, they are now over here, and everything is all right. But when you unpack it like that, it is set in stone unless you, of course, click undo, because undo works. It will just return back to what it was. So Unpack is a very nice new feature. If you actually like created the shapes that you want with the bigger objects, like bind objects over here, but you also want to add that additional detailing. So to go to individual strands over here and basically change them however you want, you can do that now with Unbind. And just remember that you cannot put those curves back to one curve. It's one-way operation. Now, the other limitation of Unpack is you cannot unpack anything but cards or tubes, right? So if you have some crazy shape attached to one curve using bind, and you will try to unpack it, this shape will be basically just ignored completely. So it will unpack everything that it can, but ignore everything else. So the main shapes that are supported are cards like this. You'll see just a regular one-sided card, right? And of course, tubes, just like this. Of course, they can have like any deformation you want, but they should be cards or tubes. Now, another new minor feature, I would say, is options and duplicate and unparent curves. Sometimes you want to use those curves that you have over here in some other project, or you want to use, I mean, not the procedural curves, right? The curves themselves, just normal Maya curves. You want to extract those curves from those objects, and you want to export them or maybe do something with them. You can either do Control D, Control P, right? And it will duplicate and unparent those curves and parent them to the world, and you can then do anything you want with them, right? So those are not procedural anymore. Or you can just select it and click on this button, and it will do basically the same thing. The nice thing about this function that you cannot by mistake duplicate twice or forget to unparent them or something like that. It will unparent them and place them in the root over here, so you can do anything you want with them. Now, another new minor feature in this update is automatic sampling. If we go to Curve Control window and expand the other tab over here, you'll see that sampling accuracy is now grayed out. Before it was something like that, and you could decrease or increase this sampling accuracy manually. And you might know that if you have a low CV count on the curve, let me just rebuild it to, let's say, 1, right? And it means basically for CVs, the minimum amount you can have on the curve for it to actually function in Maya. If you have so little CVs, low values of sampling accuracy could cause distortion in the mesh. Now, it's not too bad. Let me just disable the X-ray. It's not too bad on this mesh. As you can see, it's kind of fine. But if I lower it a little bit more, you'll see that distortion is getting worse and worse. And it's even worse if I disable auto refine. You'll see, yeah, it's now not a braid. It's something like a weird cylinders over here, just like that. And even if I increase the sampling accuracy without the automatic refine over here, you will see that you'll need a lot of refinement to actually get this shape back into its original shape, basically. So what it does now is if you enable refine and auto refine, it will handle this increasing or decreasing of sampling accuracy for you. So what you need to do is to just rebuild the curve and enjoy nice and not distorted geometry. As long as auto mode is enabled on both of them, you can basically ignore this completely and just model away. Now, another minor improvement in this update is full support of Maya standard surface material for Maya 2024. So in 2024, we have a new material that's called standard surface, and you could use it with transparency in viewport, like this one is the standard surface. Those are old materials. And unfortunately, some changes to that material caused the UV editor to misbehave, and you could see the material over here, the texture I mean, but you couldn't use the alpha and transparency options over here. Now it's fully supported. You can just go and alpha only or use the transparency separately on standard surface materials in Maya 2024 as well. So it fully functional, and I also improved the search for textures in your material graph, so you can now have nodes between the shader node and the file node that you use to load the texture. So you have like if you have like color adjustment or something like that there, it will ignore it and it will find your texture file regardless. So that is an improvement as well. Now, another improvement in this update is Fill can now create only curves if you want. So by default, if you select some procedural cards like that, in this case it's bind objects, but it doesn't matter for Fill. You click Fill and you'll see that it will basically fill the gaps between those objects, selected objects, with the duplicates basically, right? And of course it will create curves and everything else, and they are fully procedural. You can change orientation and all that. But now, if you really want that, you can go to options and you can check this option, Fill creates only curves, just like that. And if you now select the same curves and you click Fill, you will see that Fill will now create just the curves without anything. They're just like regular curves, nothing procedural about them. So if you need this option for some reason, you can have it by just clicking on this Fill creates only curves. Now, Rebuild slider now has limited support for curves that have construction history on them. So, for example, if you used lattice before, you can do that, of course, with CurveTools lattice. And let's say you did something like this, right? And I don't know, change this just like that. And this lattice is still here, or if you have any other construction history related stuff on the curves, you couldn't use rebuild curve before. Well, now you can just rebuild. As you can see, it rebuilds the curve. The only limitation to this is that you do not have the preview. So let me just apply the lattice by clearing history on the curves and the lattice, just like that. Alt-Shift-D. And if you rebuild curve, you'll see that you have a nice preview. I mean, the flying CVs over there, right? But with the lattice on top, let me just create another one, just like that. You will not see those CVs at all. You'll just have the curve rebuild, but you'll see the count, and that's basically all that matters for most of the people. And you'll, of course, have the preview of the curves when it's being rebuilt. You will see the deformations after the rebuild process is done. So that's the new rebuild curve functionality. Now to some bug fixes in this update. Tubes will now scale properly when you change width and X and Z axis over here. And as you can see, when I increase this to a higher value, it will not start deforming. Or if I, for example, change only one axis, you will see that I can basically do this almost indefinitely, and no deformations or no other artifacts will happen, because before it started to change the other axis. When I, for example, changed Z, it will change X or vice versa. Right now, they are completely independent, and it doesn't matter even on high values like that. Now, another bug fix in this update is related to a special function in Curve filter over here called Auto Hide Curves on Inactive Collection. So before you couldn't use your hotkeys on the layers when you had that enabled, so you couldn't just show and hide curves over here like that, holding Alt key like I'm doing it right now. But now, as you can see, the function is working. So when I change the collection, the visible curves are shown or hidden, and I can also show and hide them just like before, just like without this option, holding Alt key and clicking on the layer. So this bug was fixed. Now, the last minor bug fix in this update is related to plugins, the native Maya plugins. Let me just open the plugin manager over here, and you'll see that you have a bunch of plugins disabled or enabled by default in Maya, right? And sometimes some users go here and start enabling, disabling auto load and stuff to speed up the Maya loading and stuff. I saw a lot of tutorials online how to do that, but this will lead to some problems if the tools that you are using actually use some of the nodes from those plugins, right? So you disabled those plugins and the tool cannot use it anymore. This happened with just CurveTools as well, because some of those plugins are actually enabled by default, and I assumed that they will be enabled, and I use some of the nodes in CurveTools from those plugins, but some users disabled it and it had a lot of small issues or big issues. So right now CurveTools will enable those plugins automatically when you click on any of those buttons. When you initialize the plugin or something like that, it will check if those plugins are enabled, and it will enable but only those plugins that it actually needs. So it will not enable anything like extra for you, right? So if it needs some plugin, it will enable it by default right now. And this is it. This is the update for GS CurveTools version 1.3.2. This is a free update, so you can find it in your marketplace of choice. Just go to your profile and download it there. Also, all of the links are in the description, so if you need to read the documentation that was updated, of course, for this update, if you want to see other links and timestamps for this video, it's all there, you'll find it there. So, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoy this tool and this update, and see you next time!